attention, appreciation, and approval. That's like three drugs. That's their cocaine.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us on Estranged Parents. And I want to welcome Ashta to our interview today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us about your backstory before we get into the estrangement.
Well, I am an intuitive awareness coach, and I am a certified hypnotherapist. I practice yoga, specifically science of the personality. Anybody who knows yoga knows it's a vast teaching, so I zeroed in on that. So I've been teaching for about 20 years. So, and I bring my background up because I didn't expect to be part of the statistic because I thought I was doing what I thought was right, and but there is no right way in parenting. Just like our parents couldn't create our mind, we can't create our child's mind.
Well, you're in a unique position because you're a coach and also have experience with estrangement yourself. So let's talk a little bit about you personally.
Well, personally, I have four children, and their age ranges from 19 to soon to be 37. So the 33-year-old and the 37-year-old, 6 years ago, the second child and I had a argument, a conflict. But we always have conflicts with our kids, and I put it down to when everything settles, clear heads will prevail, and we're going to be back to mother daughter talking. And then that didn't happen within a time that we usually would, because we've always had our falling out. And then the second child, the eldest child, followed her. So the two siblings got together. And then now it's been 5 years because she sort of followed the second child within a year later. Again, I thought when everything blows over, clarity prevails, everything will be back, because I never saw myself as someone they couldn't speak to because of doing awareness coaching. I always thought I was approachable. Then the last two children followed suit 3 years later, and I was absolutely crushed. I was uninvited to my daughter's graduation, high school graduation. I did not know that was a thing because I had, by this time, we had talked about prom dresses, we had talked about, her yearbook and things like that. And so when I was actually working. I live in Toronto, and I was actually working in the Caribbean. So when I returned from the Caribbean from my job, uh, both of the youngest kids came, and I was floored that I was told I was uninvited. I wasn't needed. Um, I was abusive, and and I was just hearing all these things that, and I think I'd mentioned this earlier. I literally felt, because I like to cook, so I can only describe it as like this fish lying on a counter with my guts beside me. So when that happened, I spent weeks and weeks and weeks crying. I started to have a lot of self hate. I hated the universe. I hated self awareness teaching. Intuitive awareness became something that, to me, I thought, this is useless. Why am I even bothering with this? Long story short, that very uh, pain was what brought me back to being able to teach again, being able to accept, because then I saw what I needed to do,
Yeah.
which was I engaged what I knew. I started to engage what I knew because, I had my own business, and I literally fired myself from my own business, which wasn't the best thing because then suddenly I was facing homelessness. I was facing a divorce as well. Because I had seen the marriage long time coming to an end, and that didn't hurt me because it's sort of thing. What hurt me was these children. I couldn't. They would not talk. They would not get together at a table to talk about this. No one wanted to reconcile. And, I came from a very traumatic background with a mother that, but the background I came from, we always had this community that always said to us, it's your parents, in the West Indian language, it's your parents' girl, it's your mom, it's your only mom, talk to her. So I always made an effort with my mom So I just assumed this is what everybody else, the community, because my gray hair shows that I come from an older generation. Then I started to realize that this is something different. This is a new generation. This is a generation that's being taught individualism versus community, versus your immediate community help. And then the politics and marketing, because I had to start observing. I had to see what was it, where did this, questioning myself, where did this all go downhill? Was it completely me? Because if it is, I will own this completely me. But something kept saying it's more than me, it was bigger than me.
Right. This is a good point.
And I want to make sure I get this in today, that the misconception that we're hearing is that children who are estranged from their parents, it's because the parents is abusive. And I agree. I want to say I'm addressing parents that are non-abusive. I agree there's parents that are abusive, but I can honestly say in my practice of 20 years, the majority of parents are so-called normal. We grew up in a sort of like a Brady Bunch era. We grew up in an era of, quite frankly, where we were spanked, but then we never spanked our own children, you know? So sometimes I wonder about that discipline, because you get a lot of flack for these types of, disciplining your child and so on. What I observed was politics and marketing was making the family unit very divisive. Politics and marketing on social media has a lot to do with dividing parent and child. The other thing I noticed was family structures. Family structures became very loose from my day to now. And loose in the sense of there was uncles not talking to uncles, or aunts. We never visited our, like when I was growing up, we always visited our aunts and uncles. There was always gatherings. And then suddenly in North America, the lifestyle was you're not visiting each other as much. You're not interconnected with your cousins as much. And I want to bring this up because when I was doing research, it was interesting that families who were rooted in traditional culture wasn't experiencing this. So, there's something to say for traditional culture. And in my case, I had had such a off and on relationship with my mom, so that's what my children saw. And certain members of my family, I just wanted to keep them protected from, where sometimes I think now maybe I should have exposed them so they could have made their own decision. In fact, I made the decision to keep them away, which today, I'm paying the price there, because when I was estranged from my mom, which I did because she was abusive, now my children are estranged from me.
And when the first two estranged, or even the first, how many years ago was this?
That was 6 years ago.
And now they're all estranged. Is that right?
Well, no, right now. So what happened was, as I went through this process, I started recognizing that I had this parent persona, what I thought I should be.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and based on my background of teaching, I started to reteach myself. We got to learn, unlearn, relearn. I always tell everybody this. Just know that this is life: learn, unlearn, relearn. So I was relearning now that, wait a minute, who was really hurt? This personality as a parent that had this expectation of my children. So when I recognized that there was a certain persona, which meant as long as I had this personality, I wasn't actually being authentic with my children, because I was saying, well, what went wrong? The moment I question what went wrong, that means I was acting in a personality in a way that I thought would be good for them. Yeah, I tried not to be like my mother, so to speak, but in trying not to be like her, there was many, many instances I can recall where I did become
This
her.
is a really interesting point because so many people that I've heard now from our comment stream are basically complaining that the parents don't treat them like adults when they reach adulthood, and they're very upset by this. In fact, even my own daughter, who's not estranged, 2 months ago we visited her, and I had this persona myself where I treated her, I guess, like a daughter because I that's habitual and I love her and we have a special relationship. But she also said, "Look, I'm in a an adult situation now, and I live and work with adults, and to have you treat me like a child in front of them is embarrassing.
And it's very true, because there comes a time when we do have to and we do this all the time as we are from children to adulthood. We're constantly changing our personality, and we have several personalities. I'm showing you one now. When I come off this, I might be yelling and screaming at my neighbor. Who knows, right?
Right.
But based on recognizing, but wait a minute, I had a persona with my children. I wanted them to see me a certain way. So I dropped that persona through a lot of introspective questioning and self reflection.
Right.
So when I re engaged now with the last two kids, it was the two younger ones, we have a remarkably quality relationship today. That doesn't mean they call me every day. That doesn't mean they tell me what's going on in their life every day. But when we do interact, which is maybe once every 5 to 6 weeks or so, especially the youngest one, um, it is a quality interaction. Like I'm there asking her, how is your job? Not did you make sure to get to the bus on time, sort of thing, like how's your job? And then she would tell me about her job, what's going on in her life. And I encourage parents to do this, to learn to listen, because listening, when you listen correctly, you will connect to what that person is vibrating, not the words, but just what they're vibrating. And a cue that you're not listening is if you already have an answer in your head before they're finished talking, then you know you haven't listened to them. And we all do it. I've done it. I've got an answer going while they're talking,
Right.
and I realized I hadn't been listening.
Right.
So that's how the two that I reconnected with, it was really based on, I had returned to Toronto last summer. Actually, it just happened in August, and I says, look, I'd like to talk. And based on how we were talking, that's what created that difference. Because I was, like for example, when my daughter says to me, I was there but not there, I can't tell her, oh, I don't see it that way. I was a stay at home mom. No, it's, you know what? I understand how you feel. I did the best I could, but how can the two of us move forward from this now? How can we move forward from this?
Yeah.
And we really started moving forward because she started seeing that I was listening. I wasn't trying to poke holes in her story or anything.
So that's really fascinating. But you had an opportunity, you had an open connection with your daughter.
Not for a long
Not
time.
for a long time. So that's what I'm curious about is, did you know that the estrangement was coming? Did you see the signs, or did it just hit you like a bus?
It hit me like a bus because definitely I thought it was just a conflict that, again, when clear heads prevail, we were going to be talking again, because that's what always happened when they were growing up. It was never all bad, and it's unfortunate that right now, and I think part of this is social media as well, a lot of kids are diagnosing themselves. And for example, this word narcissism and depression, it's so saturated, it gets thrown out. And people are self-diagnosing. So when they self-diagnose, they're coming to you with, we're not teaching kids that it's okay to be depressed. Every day is not going to be bright and beautiful. We're
Right.
not teaching them to embrace those depressing days. Media is actually teaching our children that you got to be happy all the time. If you look at ads, all these ads are about, create your dream life. Well, I teach people, don't create a dream life. Dreams are unsustainable. They come to an end. Just create your life. And it's so we're looking at this is coming from marketing as well. There's beliefs. Children have different beliefs, different values, and the key to knowing your child also is to observe what they are being looking at on social media. What are those marketings that's influencing them? Marketing influenced us back in the day too. We had our hippie days.
So I'm really curious about the reasons here. This is a really important area for most parents, obviously. How much do I contribute to this estrangement, or what is the societal impact? In other words, it could be friends and family, or friends, it could be other family members, it could be teachers, media, politicians, you name it. It goes on and on. Social media. So we're really been bombarded. I mean, as we've grown up, we've seen, TV with 3 channels to, cable TV with 500 channels. Now we see infinite channels with YouTube and Instagram everywhere. It's just overwhelming. I think we're just being bombarded from every direction with messaging, and who do you trust? And it's like, where, Ashta, did have things gone wrong? Was it the introduction of cable TV? Was the introduction of the internet?
Well, I would say for my second daughter, she was the first one that went estranged, the 33-year-old. And from the time it was Facebook, from the time Facebook she was got onto Facebook, we saw a downhill turn from there. If she ever hears this interview, she may say that's not the fact. But as I'm looking now, what's happening is children are seeing things before their brain has a chance to comprehend it. Like we have 16-year-olds talking about narcissism, that their brain hasn't comprehended what it is. You see, so they're being bombarded with this, just like how we feel overwhelmed. They're feeling overwhelmed, but on top of which they got to pretend to their friends that they know exactly what's going on, that
Right.
it's back to that in crowd thing. And this was my observation with it. On top of which we do have some psychiatrists, psychologists that do endorse this talk that, like I said, it's a misconception that all parents are abusive. So, for example, I did yell at my children. I did yell and say, clean your room. I did yell and say, you're grounded if you don't take out the garbage. I am shocked that today I'm being told because I'm yelled, it was called abusive. It's mentally abusive language. Then how do you guide your child? Do you leave how do you create values? How do you create traditions, for that matter? Because we're being told when your parents invite you over, it's up to you if you want to go or not. Yes, that is true, but there's also an element that, uh, you know the misconception also is that it's not totally the parents' fault. It takes two to tango. It takes two to do this dance. And one and one is two, and two is a whole number. So it takes two to make us whole. We're constantly interacting. So it's a giving and a receiving. What we're seeing now is a taking and an accusation. And you're not even having, for me, I can tell you the worst thing for me was that I didn't get an opportunity with the two girls to sit down and say, let's talk about
I
it.
was going to ask you this question. I'm glad you brought that up. We did not get that chance, and many people don't. So why would our kids be afraid to do that? Are they fearful? Are they just done with us and need to move on and be healthy? Why won't they sit down and talk about this with us?
I believe uh, deep down it is a fear, but that is being endorsed by media. Again, you're an individual. You have a right to say and do what you want, and that is true. But we also have to realize humans are interconnected. That's what how nature made us. We're interconnected. Personally, from the intuitive awareness point, it's fear of conflict, fear of a confrontation, fear of expressing themselves, and also I do believe this. It's a shame, because the longer it goes on,
Mhm.
I cannot see, knowing basic human characteristics would dictate that you would be shamed of your own behavior. So it's comes down to, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? So think about when we were teenagers, we wanted to be right at all costs. We wanted to be right. So now these children are going through this of just wanting to be right. And statistics do say only 2 to 5% of estrangements result in reconciliation. And because the longer I perceive, the longer that it's gone on, the more accepting both sides is of it.
It's hard to get past the parent persona. I know we're coming back to that, but it's very, very powerful in parents. You know, you spend 18 plus years of your life helping this little thing grow up and caring and putting everything into it, all this energy, and then all of a sudden, it varies by time for other people, but they just reject you, and it's tragic. It's like betrayal. And and yes, you can realize that maybe your persona is part of the problem, but it's so complex. Why are families so messy? It's
Well,
just
it's because the dynamics are just all over the place. But it's quite easy to drop that persona if you want to. Because the reason we don't want to dissolve that personality is because we're so attached to it. And when that personality goes, what's left? Just Ted and Ashta. And who are Ted and Ashta? Because our whole life surrounded these children. And now it's an opportunity for us to actually be our own best friend. And because part of this too is our energy of dependency on our children. They also feel that because we all feel each other's energy. We know when we walk in a room and someone's angry with us and they're saying, "Oh, I'm fine," but that fine means they're angry. We've always gone through that. And so, looking at it from both perspectives, energy interacts, and children feel when, I think the term they use now is helicopter parents. They feel when they're being smothered. They feel when, just like how we felt when we needed to leave our homes at 18, 19, 20, 21. And what did we say? We went to find ourselves. But society was different, because when we found ourselves, we would still be engaging with our parents. What we are seeing is children doing exactly what we did, but they don't want to engage with us because they're being taught differently. Before, it used to be it takes a community to raise a child, but now it's back to that, it's an individual's choice. But when we go individual, then we can become very selfish at that point, and we're not actually thinking of the whole, because really it's supposed to be what is for the best interests of everyone
yeah,
here.
yeah.
And in particular, my son, I wanted to say, when I first engaged with him, it was very, very static. And I said to him there and then, I says, we can either walk away today and never see each other again, or this isn't working for me either. And we have to accept that as parents. It's not working for us. And a relationship has to work for both parties. And if they don't want to talk, then we have to do something to get what works for us, which is acceptance that we're no longer their parents. And many times philosophers tell us we give birth to children, we raise them, but they're not, they don't belong to us. And I wanted to say we're the only species on the planet that hold on to our children for this length of time as well. Most species, their children go earlier. So it really comes down to, it's an attachment coming from us. It's a neediness coming from us. It's our persona as a parent failed us because we thought we did everything right. And now we're looking at ourselves and we're not failed. It's just that this child has a different personality. I have a different personality. My grandmother used to hold up her hand and say, I made 5 children, and they're like my fingers. None of them are the same size.
It seems to me a lot of these kids today, I feel like an old geezer saying that now. These kids today, they don't seem to exhibit any empathy, especially the ones who have been commenting on our videos. They're very angry, and they take a lot of it out on us, or at least on Diane. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on empathy and sympathy.
Empathy and sympathy, I can just say from my perspective as an empath, empathy is when you're literally walking in that person's footsteps. You're literally feeling what they're feeling. Um, Whereas sympathy is like, I sympathize with you. What can I do to help? An empath feeling, and I can say this because of being an empath and because of being an estranged parent, um, this is why I can help other people, because I literally am walking in that body. It's like I'm stepped into Ted and Diane's body, and I literally know what they're feeling. Versus sympathy, where I'm detached completely, where I can go off and do my own thing, and I don't care what happens to Ted and Diane after. And the anger these children are displaying. I remember in my travels in India, a great guru said to me, he said, active anger is sadness, and sadness is inactive anger. So, anger of any kind is sadness. And I remember practicing this with my kid because he would say, when your child is angry, ask them in the middle of that anger, what are you sad about? And I did this with my son once, and I recall him stopping in that instant. He goes, because you're not listening to me. So we've mistaken this anger for something bad. Number one, you're not, we're taught now we're not supposed to be angry, even though you go in a lot of these groups and they say, oh, express yourself, but you know you can't express yourself on a group because they'll kick you off. Nobody really wants to hear your stuff. So these children are also faced with, nobody really wants to hear their stuff. The other thing, Ted, is victimization sells on the internet. It's a big ticket item on the internet. So these, we have a generation of kids that grew up on the internet. They're getting very much a lot of attention. So think of attention, appreciation, and approval. That's like three drugs. That's their cocaine. And no parent can give that amount of attention, appreciation, approval throughout the day that they're receiving on the internet. So when you come off the internet now, social media, suddenly the dopamine goes down, everything goes down. And now you're expecting to get your kick from your parent as well. So, and I'm not saying these kids are bad. I'm just saying let's look at what's happening. Let's look at the reality of what's happening. They come off social media with all their friends and following, then the parent is expected now, because if you're on social media, let's say 4 to 5 hours a day at a minimum, just at a minimum, when you come off, your expectation is your parent is going to talk to you the way your friend spoke to you.
Right.
I remember my son came over with his friends one day years ago, and I can't remember what I was saying. And his friend looked at me and he said something, and he goes, "No way, dude." And my son actually said, "Did you just call my mom, dude?" Because that's how they're talking.
Yeah, there's a lack of respect, though, a lack of empathy from kids, and I totally understand. It goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about the being overwhelmed with so much information and so many voices, and the adulation that they get from the likes and the comments and the watching and all this sort of thing. It's intoxicating. I think we didn't have that. Like we had TV, but we didn't have a community around us with the same intensity or volume. I mean, you go to school and you'd have some friends, and you come home and do homework, and maybe see your friends or and see your parents, and life was simpler.
I always say simplicity was my mantra, is my mantra, but I have to say that one of the reasons they lack empathy, and I found it in myself as well, is when you're saturated with all the negativity on the internet, when you're saturated with it, you become numb to it. So think of a child who, current children who are growing up, and their birthdays and Christmas, their every gift has to top the other gift. Every gift. I know a couple in particular. I mean, the gifts to their children are like these AV bikes and dirt bikes and stuff, and they're putting this on their credit card, by the way, to give to their children. So now the child is saturated. So when they get a gift, they don't care. They're just going to use it for a couple of days and it's gone. It's like, think, and I love this example that I'm about to say. Think of Halloween. When I used to go trick or treating, I those candies lasted me 6 months. Today, a child going to school has a candy in their lunchbox every day. So Halloween, they just don't care. They donate the candy, right? So they're saturated with all this negativity. So that permeates in us, regardless. It's an energy. If they're going to be watching other victims on YouTube, they're looking at other, stories of people killing, and the protesters, the oil protesters, and all these things. That becomes part of you, that energy. And I tell any parent to experiment with this. Just sit on YouTube for even 2 hours and just watch the politics, watch the oil protesters, watch what's going on in Israel and Palestine. And when you get off that, I guarantee you, you're going to get off feeling disgruntled, unhappy. angry, you're going to be snapping at anyone else in the house. So it's and I do hypnotherapy, and really it's a hypnosis. It's a marketing hypnosis, and I've been saying for years we should have some kind of government regulation on marketing, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to say it here,
Hmm.
because marketing, I mean, even when they're marketing to children 4 and 5 years old, why aren't we seeing regulations in this? Because this is altering their mind, and altering their mind at a stage when they can't handle it.
Right, that's right. And at what stage is, I've heard that 25 is kind of the defining or a typical age for the growth of the, or maturity of the brain. Is that generally true, or do you know other?
Well, I generally don't believe in that, because I think from age 0 to 12, we are programmed by our environment. So if you come from an abusive family, you will end up having significant difficulties as an adult. And even if you're not, those significant differences you will have based on society's influence, your parents' influence, your community's influence, your friends' influence. So, I think marketing really did us an injustice.
I think it goes well beyond marketing, but that's fine. I think it goes into indoctrination.
Yes. And that's what marketing is. If you look at marketing today, it's indoctrinating. And this has confused. We have more mental health disturbances now that we've had it historically. We have more children now. We're seeing childhood dementia, for crying out loud. Like, come on, what's happening? Something is, the system has collapsed. So back to the strange parenting. This is not all 100% blame on the parents. Absolutely not. And as I said, I do agree. There's parents who are abusive. That does have to be addressed. But the vast majority really did not do that.
Do you have any statistics that you've found about the separation between percentage of abusing abusive parents and non-abusive parents?
That I don't have a statistic, but I can tell you an observation, because when this whole thing started with me, I went on some parent groups. And I have to tell you, the majority of groups that I personally saw were parents that were sending the police on their children. I remember going on this particular group, and this father was saying, "My son is he's just a stupid asshole," and I'm like, I wouldn't even think of saying that about my child. So, and when I see some of the responses from the children that are very harsh, like, this parent should, I can't believe this parent is a narc, the child was right to leave. You can see where their background came from.
So all of these kids who are unhappy, at least expressing anger towards, I'm just bringing it to my home to us, where they're expressing so much anger. I think they represent really less than 20% of the viewership, but they have almost 80% of the comments, and they're all just horrendously negative.
And those are the kids, but I've seen the other side with parents who are horrendously
Sure.
terrible. You know, uh,
Yeah.
my daughter's an idiot. She doesn't know how to take care of her child. I've seen that as well. This is why I said, I
Yeah.
think it's not the majority, because if you look at the internet, it's a small pool. Usually, parents, like for myself, when I went on that group, or several groups that I looked at, I just backed out and deleted it. So it makes me wonder of the people who are staying in it and ruminating in this hate against their child. Some of them are highly resentful. They don't know what I did for them. It's like, no wonder your child doesn't like you. I mean, I wouldn't like you if I was your child, right?
No, you're right. It goes both ways. We talked about reconciliation. We mentioned in our discussion prior that it's very, very low, the chances. And
Very low.
if you're looking to heal parents who are really just distraught from this trauma, this is trauma for many. Our belief is that we need to find a way to detach, to be happy without the relationship. What's the success rate of being able to detach? It's a very difficult process. We've done it personally, but others are just 10 years in, 15 years in, they cannot do this. So I'm really curious your thoughts on this.
It's a belief is when we're for or against something. We either believe it or we disbelieve. So the first thing I would ask any parent is, why do you disbelieve that you can't detach from this child? Because then it comes down to fear. And the fear is, if I detach from this child, what's going to happen to me? Because at the end of the day, they still have an inner child, mini me ego in there. We all have it. It's been proven scientifically, all these things about that inner me ego. And this is why I developed this program to help those parents go through that detachment process. Because when you're attached to someone, they're in charge of your emotions. So let's put it this way, if your daughter called you now, you would be happy as a lark. But if 6 months from now still something isn't happening, you're going to feel that twinge all the time. There's always going to be a little spark there. So, which means she's still in control of your emotions. And whether it's a child, a spouse, a friend, a mom, or a dad, no one should be in control of our emotions. No one should have the ability to rise our energy and lower it. No one should have that ability. An attachment means literally someone, you've given someone that right to control your emotions. So now I'm teaching parents to take back that, to control your own emotions. And first, we got to work on that fear. Why are you afraid of believing that detachment can work? What does detachment mean to you? I know in Western society, a lot of people feel that detachment means you're not going to have feelings for your child, or, it means you're shut down and things, but it's not. It actually means you're even more open up. Because what I'm teaching parents to do is to be their own best friend, not to try to be best friends with your child or nobody else for that matter. It's to be your own best friend, and how to be happy in your aloneness. Because what is happening, it's a loneliness and neediness. Loneliness is when we're needy and we want this child because this child has to fulfill something in us, and that in itself is unhealthy for both parties. Any child that I actually think, even with your daughter stepping away, it's actually healthy that they're able to step away, because any child who's hovering over the parent is actually quite unhealthy. It's quite an unhealthy thing to do.
But one thing I'm curious about is, I think it's related. I mean, we get this anger, and again, it comes back to the fear and the society and all this. But we get this comment by many, many estranged children who say they don't owe their parents anything.
Because if listen to what the child is saying, I don't owe you anything. Therefore, what is the parent saying? You owe me something because I raised you. The whole idea we're upset is because we invested so much time. I mean, we have to take a really strong look at ourselves, which I had to do. And I really had some shameful moments of yeah, exactly this. I did raise you. I did invest time, so I deserve. There's a certain level of deservingness that we parents feel we have. And what the child is saying is, I don't owe you. I didn't ask you to do these things. And they're right. Who asked us to do these things? Society said this is how we were supposed to raise them.
But they also didn't ask us to abandon them in a garbage can when they were kids. I mean, it's implied to me. Like, it's not that you owe us something. It's more like you appreciate us or you honor us.
When we have an expectation, we believe our child is supposed to treat us a certain way. Now, when they are estranged from us, then that's a slap in the face. It's like a reality check. Oh, wait a minute. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. And really, what we're struggling with as parents is it wasn't supposed to happen this way. And now I'm hurt that it happened this way. And the struggle is to accept, to understand and accept that yes, it did happen this way. And I did have an expectation. I do have, and you do, you've said it. It's, several times, you've sort of hinted to that it is true. And I had that expectation too. I'm not saying I'm void of that, but I had to work through it, because my choice was either crying every day and spending my twilight years waiting for somebody to call me, or taking a good strong look at myself and saying, where's this breakdown? What was it for me? Forget them. They will deal with their stuff. But what is it for me? How is it affecting me? I had the expectation. I had the expectation that when everything cooled down and clear minds prevailed, everything would be fine. That was my expectation. So why was I crushed? Because that belief, I couldn't bring myself to believe that that it would be any other way.
This is the paradox because you mentioned earlier, and we all know that humans depend on each other, and we depend on social. So we have social capital. It's important that we have social interaction and we have relationships, and yet the opposite then is to be detached from those relationships. So it seems to me it's a very interesting situation.
Depending on someone is very different from, let's say, longing for them, pining away for them. Think about if it was a think about a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and they break up, but then the girl becomes a stalker. So the word stalker covers the qualities of that neediness, that longing. I must have them, and we say stalking is very unhealthy. And what do we do to our children? Some of us stalk them even on social media to see what they're doing. So we have to accept that an independent relationship means that we're not dependent on each other. We're
Yeah,
still helping each other, but it's a different from pining away, that neediness, that longingness, that I gotta see you because if I don't see you, my day isn't good. That's not that's dependent on the child to make you happy because it's like a breakup. It's like a bad breakup.
it's almost like if you bring it into business talk, there's almost like the sunk cost idea, right? Too, where you have sunk cost and you don't want to let go of a deal.
Yes, I haven't heard the term, but I do have a friend that did that, and it cost him dearly. He
Right.
held on to a project, saw it going downhill, couldn't detach from it, and it sunk him. Attachment will destroy you. It will, and that's what brought me out of this because I had to start recognizing those principles that I had started life coaching with.
Let me ask you, no contact. I think one of the big problems with this estrangement process is just not being able to have that connection where the relationship is essentially over, and it's hard to get past that understanding. Is there a way to reestablish contact, even though, let's say, you're fully detached and you've accepted and you're in joy mode and happy days, you still would like, because you love your child and you'd still like to connect. Is there a way to reconnect with no contact?
Once you're detached, there will be no thought in your head about reconnection. You will absolutely be in that space where if it ever happens, I'm there. And if it doesn't, but there will be no thought of it. If there's thoughts of it, that means you're still attached.
Ah,
There's no thought of it. And the thought of even I don't even teach reconciling because that is dependent on the other person. Again, you're giving your power to the other person. It's about taking back your power and saying, no, I have to take care of me first. And whatever that me is, even if it means I got to cry 24/7 because I can't talk to you. But think of it this way, we want to reach out to our, because I did this in the beginning. I would reach out, happy birthday, merry Christmas, and I even sent the e-transfer for a birthday gift, and I got it was returned, and that devastated me too. But think of it this way, we're doing that reaching out. It's not love, by the way, because love would dictate that, yes, I understand you want your space, so I'm not going to encroach on it. So this is how a guru described love, and for me. Think about if a man and his wife is living together and he has an outside affair. So now it's bothering him. He's feeling really bad and guilty. It's not bothering her because she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know what's happening. She's happy, she's going along. So he is so guilty and feeling bad. What does he do? He confesses to her. And once he confesses, what happens? He feels better. Now he's put it on her to feel bad. So when we are reaching out, we're reaching out for us to feel better, not for them, because they have said, I really don't want any contact with you. And that is a rejection that we have to deal with. Why do we feel so rejected by this person? Where is my self-esteem? Where is my self-worth that I'm feeling rejected by this person? Because when you know your self-worth, I read this someplace, you never give anyone a discount. When you know yourself, you can never give anyone. So, and anyone includes your children as well. This is why I don't promote reconciliation, because that indicates that you're going to be fighting for that other person to be talking to you. And one of the misconceptions that I see happening in the in this psychology world is that they are pushing reconciliation, they are pushing sometimes mediation, and the kid just doesn't want it. So what are you doing when someone doesn't want? You keep telling them, even if it's me, if I don't want something and you keep backing me up against a wall, I don't want to see you again. So
It's
we
like you're
got,
being insulted. You're just constant, like, I don't want this. Leave me alone. I understand.
it's like
That makes
you
sense.
put yourself. We've talked about empathy. Empathy now is, can we put ourselves in our child's position now, on how they're feeling? Not sympathize with them, but empathize now. How are they actually feeling? And what can I do for myself, not to help them, but to help me? Because now it's about me. I'm the one that's crushed. And even if they're crushed and crying, they're dealing with it in whatever way. But that's not love. When someone sets a boundary, love is when they set a boundary and we says, okay, I love you enough to respect that boundary.
Have you seen in your 20 years uh, with clients, have you seen the opposite where a parent um, solves their problem, of dependency, and then the child attempts to reconnect, but the parent is aloof, or they've said, you know what, I don't need this. I don't need you in my life anymore.
Never, because when we find self love, nature dictates once you're in self love, you have no choice. It just happens that you love everyone else. You just become, it's just like a self love becomes like a forgivingness for everything. It's a peace. It's like you've come to terms with yourself. And really, the reason we're not finding self love is when we grew up, we also had a lot of shame put on us. They talk about body shame and these things. And we did. I mean, my mother used to tell me all the time, you're black and ugly like your father, when I was growing up, right? So I, had all these outer issues as well to deal with. But once you find that self love, today I can even love that mother who said that. And it's one of those mysteries in life you can't even describe, because it's not an emotion. Love is not an emotion. I tell people this all the time. Love is when you're at a funeral and you're breaking down and crying when the person's dead. That's love. People tell you, oh, don't be sad. No, that's not sad. It's love. Love comes in all ways, shapes, and forms. But one thing for sure, when you come to that balance, it's an acceptance. And that acceptance, you'll be able to accept anybody that comes within you. It's never an aloofness.
Why are we not taught about acceptance in high school or when we're growing up? We are all taught to depend on each other.
This is it. This is true. And that goes back historically as well, because, again, we're a product of our environment. One thing I wanted to say in my practice was what I do find, which is interesting, when the parent changes, the child is so accustomed to the parent being a certain way that they, every time they see the parent, can't see that change. So, like, for example, if you were to tell your daughter, look, I'm willing to accept, let's talk this out, they can't see that you've changed, because they've already been programmed to your behavior from 0 to 12.
At a high level, if we pop up a few different layers here, we see what's going on in society. We see estrangement happening, caused by many different things, but often, obviously, there's abuse. We've talked about that as a possibility, but also social media, marketing, all of these things, indoctrination. Society is in this cyclical mode. Do you see any hope of solving this estrangement issue, or are we stuck with this for another 1,000 years?
To be honest, I do believe that we're not going to see a shift in this for a very long time, given the political situation, the political environment, the marketing environment. What I can advise parents today, and anybody for that matter, is that you can't change the world. Looking at these statistics, looking at what's happening, it's just going to drag you down. The only thing you can change is yourself. And I say this with the utmost love, that nobody is required to love you. Not your mother, your father, your daughter, your priest, your uncle. Nobody's required to love you. The only person required to love you is you. And honestly, I can honestly attest to this. When you love yourself, then suddenly the rest of the world is no longer a trigger to you. You can see things happening. You can help where you need to be helped, but it doesn't weigh you down. So before we think about estrangement in the world, let's start healing ourselves first, then our home. Like, because if you have a spouse or something, and then from the home, then you go to your community center, from your community center, and you just take those gradual baby steps. And next thing you know, you are the world. You are helping the world.
No, that's really well put. I can't even think of saying that better. I see it as sort of a strength breeds respect. When you have that solid foundation of acceptance and self love, if your child comes back, I'm firmly believed. I'm curious your thoughts. It sounds like you are, that you're in a better place to accept a reconciliation.
That's right. That's right. Because, in my case, it moved from saying, making statements, I understand what you're saying, but I hear what you're saying, but it moved to, what can we do now to move this forward? Because I don't know what to do. I can't go back and change the past. But you have to be in that mindset to not be reactive, to say, I hear what you're saying, but I'm sorry, but and we do tend to do that, but it's about working on yourself first. And 99.9%, 100% of the time, all these emotions that we're going through as parents, it's actually coming from our childhood, from our interactions with our parents. There has not been a case in 20 years that I've been doing this where it was in the present moment, in the current era. It's always goes back to the childhood. And somehow our children help us to gaslight from our childhood because we're so busy taking care of them. But when they're gone, then suddenly all that, they always say, no matter how you put things in the dark, no matter how much you suppress them, it will certainly come to light. Anything in the dark comes to light. And I always advise people, like, do your inner work daily, so when you die, you don't have to deal with it all at once on your deathbed, because that's not where you want to be, dying in fear of and sorrow over things that you didn't resolve. So one thing with estrangement for sure, it really exposes what each individual involved needs to work on. It exposes what each individual involved needs to work on. So if you're feeling rejected, unappreciated, then that is something, because that's not only your daughter, that will be a friend. A day will come and a friend will do it to you, and you'll be like, I just feel so unappreciated. We were friends for so long. What happened? I've had that done with me with a friend, actually. And she wouldn't tell me why. And I was like, well, we've been friends for so long. But this stranger had the ability to bring me to tears. But then it turned out it was my mom's stuff and my dad's stuff and my upbringing.
This is fascinating. It's like you're talking about sort of a clash of needs. Like you've got the parents' needs and the child's needs. And at some point the child's needs to move on. We get that. They're growing, they're pulling away. That's normal. We get that. And the parent can't let go.
So what you have to do is say, well, why can't I move? And this is for every parent who's listening to this. Why can't I have them over for, why can't I accept that they're not coming for dinner anymore? Why can't I move on? Why can't I stop thinking about her? Why can't I? And it all comes back to the I, because what we do is our brain is, is designed to put it our perception is designed to put it on the people. Everything goes to the other person. You, he, she, they, them. Bringing it back to, wait a minute, it's not them. Why can't I stop searching the internet for answers? Why can't, and when you ask those questions, then believe it or not, within you, as mysteriously as it sounds, your own intuition will bring to you that why can't I stop feeling rejected? Why do I feel so rejected? But if you keep thinking if you keep looking at it, and this is for everybody, if we keep looking at it as the internet, the marketing, everything, it's just going to be ruminating and going in circles. Your whole twilight years are going to be wasted on research that will never make sense. So bring it back and says, well, why can't I stop searching? Why can't I stop thinking of her? And I had to do those very things. And as painful as it could be and as challenging, today I'm actually glad I did it, because it's almost like you're already in the mud, so you have no choice to wade out the mud. You're starting off in the mud, so to get out of it, you got to wade out of it, right? And it's really bringing. And there's an old thing that years ago I learned. Pardon me. It's, you spot it, you got it. As long as you see it in someone else, why can't? Because we said they seem unappreciative. Why am I unappreciative? Why can't I appreciate the time that I did have with her? Why do I want to consume the rest of her life also? Because we're indoctrinated to believe our children should be with us all the time. It's our own programming. It makes us comfortable to have them at Christmas and Thanksgiving, and those are the things we have to detach from.